Welcome back. We had a little break, and this is the second half of our podcast on sponsorship, where we talk a little bit more about the sponsor relationship, how we found our sponsors, and what to do when you need to let a sponsor go. We'll look forward to hearing your comments in the show notes or over on our private Facebook group. And please remember, we would love to have your review on iTunes. It's really simple. Just slide down the front face of your phone and hit review. Give us some stars and some words. Thanks so much for listening.
Real life for real families. Hurts, habits, and hang-ups happen in every family.
Jerry and I are here with tools to help you trust God, clean house, and tell the truth to ramp up the joy in your family.
You have what it takes.
It's time to become sober on purpose
For His purpose. So let's talk about getting a sponsor. A sponsor for me was one of the things which was suggested at my first real AA meeting. And by real, I mean when I had actually walked in there looking for help, not just trying to get my girlfriend at the time off my back. So at my
girlfriend, now wife.
Yeah, a girlfriend at the time.
Who you ended up marrying.
Right. So not, when I actually went in there knowing that these people, lived happy, joyous, and free lives and had answers to the trials that I had faced, or at least had tools to deal with the trials that I was facing. It was suggested to me right off the bat, get a sponsor, go to meetings, and work the steps. Was right off the bat. And I guess also was suggested 90 meetings in 90 days. So what are those four things? For me, the hardest thing to conquer was get a sponsor, which meant that I actually had to ask for help, which I don't know about you, but was very difficult for me. So I looked that one right in the eye and I said to myself, I am not leaving this first meeting without a sponsor. And at the end, I walked right up to somebody and I said, hey, will you be my sponsor? And it was difficult, but I did it. And he accepted. And the first thing he said was 90 meetings in 90 days.
And in the Al-Anon rooms and the CR rooms and those rooms where it is not often as critical, I mean, we're not facing jail times a lot of times, or we're not facing institutionalization or death. We often wander around and don't get a sponsor. See, we may be in the rooms for years without working the steps. And I can tell you that does not give you progress. The sponsor is the key to, if you want speedy progress, you need somebody who is really looking at you, helping you hold yourself accountable and helping you to work through the process when it gets tough, because it will get tough. And all of us have blind sides. Even the sponsor will have a blind side, or two or three. That is the person, like I said, is a history holder. And how I chose mine was I waited around for a while and didn't get serious for quite a while. For even a couple years, I didn't get serious. And then my life got turned upside down and I got serious about it. And it took, to finish up the work that I needed to do, it probably took the next year, but that person hung in there with me. And the one frustration I had was I didn't have a very regimented sponsor. I had to go and ask and continue to ask for help and for completion. She was about me coming to her. Whereas I have heard there are other sponsors that come and say, you need to take care of this section.
My sponsorship experience is more regimented, where I know in early sobriety, my sponsor said, okay, you're going to call me every single night at this time. And,
if you miss a night.
Yeah, or I was late or I missed a night. It was not good. And so I guess that's a good segue into, in my experience with sponsorship and sponseeship, is you can fire your sponsor or you can be fired. doesn't, just because you've taken on a sponsee or you are being sponsored doesn't mean either one. It's a two-way street. Either one can back out if it's not going right or the suggestions are not being adhered to.
Or the personality is just not clicking. As you're getting to know this person through this relationship, and you may have seen them in meeting, you may have spent time with them, you may have thought you enjoyed them, but if it is just not clicking, you can make changes. And I always think firing is such a strong word. You can decide to part ways, that this is not working and you need to do something different, or there's somebody else that is a better fit. Sometimes it's timing. Sometimes the sponsor or the sponsee just gets overwhelmed, or somebody's got a day shift and somebody's got a night shift and they can't sync up. There are a billion reasons. There is one problem with sponsor shopping, though. Do you want to talk about that?
I think I know what you're talking about. I had a sponsor once tell me, I don't remember the topic, but, I think he said, I don't have a lot of experience on that. Why don't you ask somebody with more experience? And I proceeded to cast a very wide net looking for answers that appealed to me rather than, the answers that maybe I would want to hear. And he said to me, after we discussed, and I don't recall the topic, but after we discussed it, I do remember him saying, if you cast a wide enough net, you'll hear anything you want to hear.
Or you'll hear the answer you want to hear, is really what he said. Not unlike doctor shopping. If you continue to shop through the doctors, you will end up with somebody who will give you what you want at some point. And that's where you need to be honest with yourself. Is they're asking me to do things I don't want to do. Is that out of bounds of either the biblical understanding or the AA understanding? Or is it within the bounds and I'm just saying I'm not ready to be part of this process?
Yeah, in the pamphlet, which I was just reading before we started this recording, it talked about if the sponsor says something that doesn't sound right or doesn't agree with the sponsee, they should really speak up and not just take anything that the sponsor says as gospel. However, hopefully there's been some thought into the choosing of your sponsor, and you would know that that person isn't likely to say anything harmful.
It is not unlike scriptural understanding. You go to the scripture and you read it. You go to a trusted advisor, your pastor, someone who is an elder in the church, and then you look for agreement between the scripture, your understanding, and their understanding. You're not shopping for an answer. You're looking to come to a conclusion that is in alignment rather than just going out and looking for the answer that suits you the best.
Yeah. And, honestly, morality, I think, is a lot less complicated than we tend to make it in the modern world. In my experience, morality it's not using violence, it's not theft, and it's not treating somebody the way that I would not appreciate being treated. If you got those three things covered, chances are you're good.
As Jerry said earlier, a sponsor should have a sponsor. They should be attending meetings. They should be inside of the program. If they want to be your sponsor and not be inside of the program, you're kind of in a touch and go situation there, and it may be time for them to say, I can't sponsor anybody. The other thing is, sometimes groups, especially in small towns like ours, run short of sponsors. If a sponsor is overwhelmed, more than 3 people really is way too many, then maybe an accountability partner is what you can do right now. And that's a person who's kind of on the same plane. I had a wonderful accountability partner, and it started very simply. If she just called me one morning and said, "How you doing?" And we just started relying on each other and checking back and forth and just checking in with each other on how we were doing. The situation is happening. Do you have thoughts on how I could handle it? How did you handle the situation? She had a few more years than I did, but we were still on the same plane. It wasn't a sponsor-sponsee relationship.
And maybe it's different with men and women, but, in my experience, men often go without sponsors for extended periods of time. And it's very difficult for us to ask for help, ask for some leadership or direction in our lives. It's a pride thing. And I've seen it done, and I've done it myself, where, let me even back up. In old time AA, it's not uncommon to have one of the old timers walk up to the newcomer and be like, okay, I'm your sponsor. Here's what we're doing. And they would,
or they'll call it a temporary sponsor until you decide, until you can figure it out on your own. Oftentimes you can be so lost that somebody will come alongside and say, hey, could we have a cup of coffee? And that's a gentle nudge towards sponsorship.
Yeah. And I have done that, I think, twice, at least once, where I have gone up to somebody and say, hey, do you have a sponsor? And they'd be like, no, I'm still thinking about it. I'm not sure if I want to choose this person or that person. I say, okay, well, I'll tell you what, until you figure it out, I'm your sponsor, and I'll be your temporary sponsor until you can get somebody who you can work with on a more permanent basis. And here's what we're going to do to start. Obviously, they have the choice to say, that just doesn't work for me, but I've never had that happen. I think it kind of takes away the tension of having to ask for help.
The sponsee has responsibility to maintain their part of the relationship, and so does the sponsor. There are courtesy rules, just common courtesy rules. Unless your sponsor says, yes, you can call me at 2 a.m. in the morning, probably not a wise idea unless it is a true emergency. Also, it is always wise to pick up the phone if you're in crisis when you call and say, do you have a minute to talk? Either way, because often at work, Jerry would not have a minute, or if I was managing the kids, I wouldn't have a minute. I would get back to you. That's important. This is a relationship you want to honor. But if that person, you're invading that person's space when you call them on the phone. So to have the common courtesy is important. It's one of the first steps in learning how to have healthy boundaries is to set up healthy boundaries with your sponsor.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm interested to hear what our listeners' questions on sponsors and sponsees are. I definitely want to see some questions, please, on our show notes or our comments, or I don't even know how it works, Tanya.
Well, we get emails. We have our Facebook group. We can get show notes, comments on the show notes over at the Joyous Family blog. All those things can happen. Sometimes we get so deep into it, we don't remember what it was like in the beginning. It's like if you started skiing at 3, you don't often remember how all that happened. So we would be interested in your questions, because I know this is a deep one and people put off doing this and letting people into your life. But it really is the component that makes the change, is letting this person into your life and to say, I am willing to step out and share what is causing me the deepest, hardest issues.
Yeah, I would say that that's a key component. There are some other really important components in my experience toward achieving any level of clean time, any sense of happiness, any joy, or any real freedom in my life. Obviously, as important as having a sponsor and working the steps was, admitting that I was powerless, turning my will and my life over to the care of God. And yeah, there's probably some other ones. There are definitely other ones, but those, I would say that those two are as important as having a sponsor.
And sponsor relationships can time out. As life moves on, as things change, as people move, and it is a strong suggestion to have a face-to-face sponsor. Just a telephone relationship is often not enough. You need someone in the same town, or at least in a close region, who can actually physically get together with you. That's an important piece with it. When sponsorship times out, it's time to look for another one. And it isn't about you don't like your sponsor anymore, but life changes happen. And that just means that it's a community of people sharing what they know, trying to achieve a happy, joyous, and free life through this.
Yeah, that's all good stuff, Tanya. Hey, I hope you liked our talk about sponsorship and being a sponsee.
Be sure and look us up. Let us know what you think, and we would love some iTunes reviews. It's really simple. You just scroll down, look underneath the available episodes, and you will find a place to review us. You click the stars, give us a few words. It would be fantastic if we had a review from you. We only need 30 for the first quarter. 30 for the first quarter. So if you split the divided 30 by 3, that'd be 10 each month. 10 this month, 10 next month.
All right.
And 10 in the month of March. Talk soon.